Hi, I'm Morten Solvik, Vice President of Mahler Foundation and host, writer, and producer of the Mahler Hour, where we bring you the personalities, places. I'm sorry, we have a problem here, technical problem. Everyone, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Morten Solvik, Vice President of Mahler Foundation and host, writer, and producer of the Mahler Hour, where we bring you the personalities, places, and projects happening right now in the Mahler community around the world. Last month, we returned to our series of programs dedicated to Mahler's life and song with the second part of our discussion of Das Knabenwunderhorn. I was joined by my co-host, Kammersänger Thomas Hampson, as well as musicologist and editor Renate Stark-Voigt. Remember, you can see this show and all past Mahler Hours on our website and on our YouTube channel. Actually, I've just found out that last show is still being processed by YouTube, and we should hopefully be able to get that to you very, very soon. It is not yet posted on our channel. Also, don't forget about sharing with us your Mahler moment, a moment that moved you when hearing Mahler's music, something unforgettable or even transformative. We want to hear about it and share it. Send us your video in horizontal format, no longer than 1 minute, to social@mahlerfoundation.org. If selected, we'll show you your video at the end of an upcoming Mahler Hour. And just to give you an example, there is Leonard Bernstein having one of his Mahler moments, one of his many Mahler moments. For this episode of the Mahler Hour, we will be taking an inside look at the prize-winning podcast Embrace Everything, dedicated entirely to the life and works of Gustav Mahler. I'll be joined by its creator and producer, Aaron Cohen. Before we get to the details, let me remind everyone attending live to post any questions you might have to the comments section. We will get to these at the end of our show. Don't forget to include your name and the country you are writing from. Also, the Mahler Hour is brought to you by Mahler Foundation. So if you want to support our activities, please become a member. Just go to our website at mahlerfoundation.org for all of the details. Let's get right to our program today by taking a closer look at yet another program dedicated to Mahler, the podcast Embrace Everything. My guest today is the creator, producer, and host of that series, Aaron Cohen. Aaron, welcome to the program.
Great to see you, Morten. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about Embrace Everything. First of all, what's the podcast about? We know it's Mahler, but you can be more specific. And what are you trying to accomplish with this show?
Sure. So each season of the podcast dives into one of the Mahler symphonies, and we've done the first 3. We're going in order. I'm currently working on season 4, which will be 4 episodes about Mahler's 4th symphony. And the goal is to bring Mahler's music and his message to the world. It's available for free on all the podcast platforms. You don't need an expensive ticket. You don't need a fancy music degree to enjoy this. It's really for everyone.
So what motivated you to start down this path? What did you wake up one morning and said, we need a Mahler podcast that goes into every symphony for a whole season? How did that come about?
Well, it took a bit of time. When I was a teenager, I loved the instrumental Mahler symphonies. And then in my 20s, I became more familiar with the ones with the choruses and the vocal soloists. But then in my 30s, I don't know exactly when, I just became obsessed with these symphonies. And I noticed that the Mahler symphonies, the concerts, these were non-negotiable. I go to a lot of concerts. I go to a lot of performances of all kinds. But the Mahler ones, I would map them out the whole year in advance. And I would buy my tickets in advance. And it just kind of became an obsession that is still with me to today. My background is as a radio producer and an audio producer, and my specialty has been audio documentaries about classical music and the arts. So in 2010, I decided I wanted to do this project. It took a little while to kind of get things going, a couple of years actually. And then in 2015, I was able to do my first interview for the series. And then after a few false starts, we finally got season 1 out in 2020. So it's been a journey. It's been a long journey.
Indeed, but it seems like looking back at it, there's an inevitability to it. Isn't that interesting? How sort of course, you were going to do something like this. All of the qualifications and dedication were there, but the pieces falling into place, that can take time, and that's kind of persistence that you could even call sort of stubborn persistence, right? Against all odds to make it work. We'll talk more about making it work in just a few minutes. Where did you get the title Embrace Everything?
Well, that comes from Mahler's famous quote from when he was talking to Sibelius. He said, "A symphony must be like the world, it must embrace everything." And we reference that at the beginning of each season. And I talk about how we're going to explore Mahler's musical embrace. We're going to see how Mahler musically embraces everything in his symphonies.
And so a season for each symphony means that you have, by virtue of the length of these works, different lengths of season, right? Is there an episode for each movement? Is that how it's broken down?
Yes, that's right. We have one movement per episode. So season 1, there's 4 movements in the symphony. There's 4 episodes, 5 movements in the second symphony, 5 episodes, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. We'll check back when we get to season 8, because that sounds like a bit much to do only 2 episodes on that enormous work.
You might expand on that one. That one we might pick it up a bit.
You might have to break the format a little bit for that.
I suspect so.
Just to give our audience, those who have not already tuned into your podcast, to give everybody a sense of what these podcasts sound like, you've selected snippets from each of the seasons. So we're going to start with season 1, symphony number 1, and have a listen to a section devoted to the third movement.
Mahler is also able to transition between contrasting styles of music with great fluidity. Back to Bill Hudgens.
I love it when he gets soft and he gets these very tender, almost sensual type moments. Some of those places are incredibly beautiful, like the transition in the third movement of this first symphony, halfway through, where it dies down and down and down, and then this beautiful soft violin melody starts this whole little section that could be something quite sensual, it could be something for a child. He does amazing things that way.
Talk a little bit more about your guests, and you will actually, from these 3 snippets, we're going to hear a variety of people chiming in, and it's part of what accentuates this in very different ways as you go through the pieces. Let's go to season 2. This is from the 5th movement.
Just as in the third movement, after a huge outburst, we see eternity peeking through. We're reminded of something greater, beyond ourselves. Caroline Kita.
Part of this is a journey of self-discovery.
Divinity is everywhere, and we all participate, whether we're aware of it or not.
One discovers it within oneself, and one recognizes it in all beings.
Mahler's close friend Siegfried Lippener put it like this.
Take the divinity of the world into your will, and it will come down from its throne.
Lippener believed that art helps us recognize the divinity within ourselves and throughout the world. And Lippener said, in our most enlightened moments, we'll be struck by the most profound thought.
The world as a work of art. In such moments, our sensibility is filled by the most sacred religious shudder. And the world as artwork, this world of religious intuition, our sensibility, will faithfully and reverently call God.
I have to let that one sink in. It's a bit much. As we do a sort of a review, we're sort of brought into that whole sphere. Aaron, kind of speechless there. Maybe we should go to season 3. Do you want to set this up in any way, or do we just want to listen to the next excerpt?
Oh, I can tell you with this next excerpt, this is our actor James Lurie, who is the voice of Mahler, and he is reading the lyrics to The Changing of the Guard in Summer over the opening of the third movement. And that theme of the third movement is from the song, The Changing of the Guard in Summer. So it's one way that we sort of bring the song into the symphony and show how they're connected.
Let's listen.
The cuckoo has fallen to his death on a green willow. The cuckoo is dead, has fallen to his death. Who shall now all summer long while away the time for us? Mrs. Nightingale shall do that. She sits on the green branch, that small and graceful nightingale, that sweet and lovely nightingale. She hops and sings, is always joyous when other birds are silent. We shall wait for Mrs. Nightingale. She lives in the green grove, and when the cuckoo's time is up, she will start to sing.
This is the text that if you know the song you're hearing, right, when you hear this music, but of course so many people hearing the Third Symphony aren't necessarily acquainted with the song. So it's a wonderful way of bringing the music and the text together. We could go down so many rabbit holes based on what we've just heard. I would rather keep going because we're going to talk about season 4 and how this is all put together. But I think everybody who's watching and listening will see what type of richness is already coming from all of this. And if we have some time, I'd love to go down some of those rabbit holes with you. But so the basic structure is that you are the narrator, and there's a backtrack of musical excerpts, comments by experts and instrumentalists, members of orchestras, and voiceovers of historical figures, most prominently Mahler himself, right? So you get this panorama of ideas and sounds.
Yes, exactly. And I like to think of a train journey I was on a couple years ago in New York State. It was a dome car going through the Adirondacks, and we had a park ranger, a forest ranger in there with us, and he was pointing everything out as we just went zipping through this incredibly beautiful, lush area. And I think that's kind of what we try to do with the podcast, where we're surfing the wave of the music, we're rolling along with the music, and these experts keep popping in and telling you, well, listen to this, look at this, how about this, what do you think of this? So the idea of sort of surfing the music, we do include the entire movement in each episode. So by the time you finish listening to one of our episodes, you have heard the whole piece. We're not excerpting exactly. But that's, I think, kind of what we're trying to do.
And the when you say you've heard the whole piece, you mean in snippets as they're discussed? Is that what you mean by covering the whole movement?
I mean, we've when I talk about riding the wave of the movement, we ride the whole movement from start to finish. We jump in at key places and talk about it, but it's different than, say, a lecture or I think of a university talk or something where you speak a little bit, you talk about what you're going to hear, then you hear it, then you go back to the speaking, and then you go back. Where ours is much more of a blend of the talking with the music. And I think I'd like to think that's sort of what makes it unique in that way, and why people like to listen to it, because they get the ride of hearing the music the whole way through.
Yeah, with the commentary. I like the dome idea of looking out the window and getting more than you bargained for in a way, and enriching that. How are you using the recordings? Are you getting recordings from orchestras that you work with? That's a technical question I hadn't thought of before.
I have to license all the recordings we use. Everything has to be paid for. And we have, originally I thought when we started, oh, I'll just pick my favorite Mahler recording and we'll just use that. And then I saw what the bill was going to be and realized that would be impossible. So we kind of actually snip it up, almost a Frankenstein in terms of, 6 different recordings all edited together so you can't tell. But in a funny way, it's turned out to work better than I would expect, because I often have my favorite parts of just each segment of a recording instead of the whole recording. So I can kind of pick and choose my favorite spots and weave them all together.
Yeah. Fascinating. And you've mentioned it before, your audience is not necessarily it's not necessarily the music expert crowd for sure, nor maybe even the Mahler sort of aficionado crowd, right? You're trying to reach beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we're a music podcast. I expect music listeners to come to this, and certainly I've heard from a lot of people who weren't familiar with Mahler, who this has really helped them enjoy Mahler. But because Mahler sort of embeds such a beautiful spiritual message into his music, I feel like it almost goes beyond music. You don't have to know anything about music. I mean, I think it helps if you like music, but it does, where he's trying to take you is something that everybody, it's really sort of universal in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you can hit that chord or make that resonate with people who aren't necessarily coming only for the music, or who discover out of that there's so much more, then they really are discovering Mahler, aren't they? I mean, this is what we're trying to get at.
Yeah, exactly.
And this seems to have struck a chord. The reception has been quite positive. Tell us a little bit about that. You were also given some very important recognition lately.
Yeah, well, we've had really great success on the Apple Music podcast charts. I should specify that these are the charts that are only music-related podcasts. So we can't compete, obviously, with political talk show podcasts or comedy or crime, true crime, all these things. So within the music podcast world, we've been able to reach #1 in the podcast charts all over the world. We've been #1 in the United States. We've been #1 in many places in Europe. Many places in South America, India, New Zealand. I'm here in Italy right now. We've been #1 here. And Morten, you're in Vienna in Austria. We have not made it to #1 in Austria. We made it to #2. So,
there's a lot going on here in music, Aaron. All I can say is there's a lot of competition. Not that there isn't elsewhere, but
well, so season 4, maybe we can get to #1 in Austria. We can do with
fascinating. Well, congratulations. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and then also in the last year, we've had some terrific awards. Season 3 has won 5 awards. Our special episode about Leonard Bernstein and Mahler, which is called Mahler and the Maestro, that's won 4 awards. And I'm currently sitting here in the Rockefeller Foundation's Bellagio Center in Italy, where I'm doing a 1-month fellowship where I'm working on season 4. And the fellowships are given to projects that the foundation deems are beneficial to humanity. So we are the first podcast they've hosted in their 60+ year history. So this is just a tremendous honor, and I am so grateful to be here. I'm here for a month. I'm actually towards the end of the month. And it's been an extraordinary, I can't even put it into words, how beautiful this location is, how amazing the other fellows that are here with me. There's a group of 13 of us, all different fields of work, but everybody has a project that they are working on, and we all have dinner together every night. You can imagine the ideas and all sorts of the top. Just the conversation is incredible. The location is, it's a magical place. It's a magical place. I'm so grateful for this extraordinary opportunity from the Rockefeller Foundation.
Well, congratulations on that too. I mean, on a very personal note, you of course get involved in bringing this. It's not just you being exposed to them; it's the other way around. And the fact that the Rockefeller Foundation has recognized the contribution to humanity, this is not because of the music; it's because of the things very things we just talked about, and the fact that Mahler is able to elicit, to inspire, and to go to those places that indeed I think strike very deeply in what it's like to be human. So that's a great sign, and certainly a sign of success in bringing out this vital aspect of our composer, if I can call him that.
Definitely our composer.
Yeah. So as you say, Embrace Everything is going into its 4th season, and you're in the midst of completing it. I have to say, one of the pleasures for me of doing Mahler Hour is that I get to get inside the many elements of these creativity around the composer today, and this is certainly one of them. Let's talk about how you pull it all together, because this is, opening up the getting under the hood of this wonderful result that many of our listeners, I'm sure, and viewers have seen. But getting inside this and how it's actually put together, I think it's important for people to understand the process and to maybe appreciate the depth of work, because I mean, just what we just heard, those few segments indicate that there's a lot going on here. So tell us, we've got a little graphic here. You've provided us with a little list of a how-to. It's more complicated than the list looks like, but this is what we've called the process graphic. And I think we should just go through each of these one at a time, not in too much depth, but to give everybody a sense. First of all, it's a longer list than many might realize, and you can flesh out each of them as we go along.
Sure, sure. Well, starting at the top, the reading and the research, I take a few months where I just read everything I get my hands on and start to think about the ways in which I can best present whatever the specific elements that are unique to the symphony are. For example, season 4, in the second movement of the Fourth Symphony, there's a violin solo that's quite unique. So I'll sort of mark down, okay, I need to find a concertmaster who can talk about this, and those sorts of things all come up in that opening sort of bit. And then I do some very long interviews with Marilyn McCoy, who is our spectacular musical and historical advisor. We've been working together for almost a decade now on this. And I can't even begin to tell you the special relationship I have with Marilyn. When we start talking about Mahler, we both care so much about this composer. We go into kind of a zone that very difficult to describe. But for example, season 3, I interviewed Marilyn for 15 hours. That's how much. That's you know. But this gives me we from these interviews. I mean, Marilyn is in the show, obviously, and she's actually an audience favorite from the beginning. She's been an audience favorite. But all sorts of ideas come from this. And this really helps me to branch out even further. Who should I be talking to? What else should I be reading? And we bounce a lot of ideas around. Marilyn's getting emails from me at all hours of the night as I'm reading and trying to figure this out. But and then after that, I start the process of recording all the interviews and reaching out to people. And in the previous seasons, the first 3 seasons, I've done all the casting of the actors myself. This season is a little different. I've hired somebody who's a real casting director to help me, because we have more actors in this season than we've ever had. I think we're going to have more than 10. And so that's something new. But the interviews are with conductors, with musicians, with musicologists, with literary scholars. We have a food expert for season 4, because there's a lot of food discussed in the last movement. So, there's a lot to interview, a lot of people, a lot of different topics to talk about. And then after I have everything, I start.
Wait, can I just jump in here for just a second? I don't want to break the flow too much, but when you record these interviews, first of all, you just said that you have conductors, instrumentalists, singers, musicologists, historians, philosophers, food experts. It gets to be a lot of material, right?
Yes.
I mean, you just said you had 15 hours with Marilyn alone. How are you on you must be constantly trying to prioritize, or do you get a transcript of everything? How do you then boil this down? Because it must be an ongoing process. You can't come at the end and say, okay, here I have my 200 hours of material and I'm going to make now 4 episodes. How long are the episodes on average, Aaron?
Well, it depends on how long the movement is. Season 3, even though the symphony is just under 2 hours, all 6 episodes came to 3 hours of audio. I think season 4 is going to be about 3 hours as well. So there is a lot of sort of trimming down and trimming down and trimming down. And often after an interview, I'll go through it and pick out, the parts that are most helpful, most useful, I think. And then as I put it on top of the music and start to think about how it's all going to work, I keep sifting it down, sort of like a Tetris game, actually, where I find the clips that are the right length of time and that fit the music. But yes, you're right. It's by the time it's done, there's an enormous amount of material that has to be gone through, and that does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And you talked about this becoming an ever longer cast of contributors. I asked, you sent us the cast lists of the 4 seasons, and I asked Marco, our technician here, just to put them in. This is not to be read, but I just give you all a visual sense of how these casts are developing. This is season 1. Next one is season 2. Season 3, season 4.
The ever-expanding cast list.
Ever-expanding cast list. I just thought that just visually gives us a sense of the increasing complexity of putting together the show, not necessarily speaking to the complexity of the pieces, or does it?
It's interesting. If I could go back to season 1 again and add a few more things, I probably would. Some of this is to do with, as I've now been doing this for a few years, I feel a little more confident in knowing that I can juggle more voices. So there's some of that. But yes, there's more. There's a lot to talk about with the different symphonies. And I'm surprised because the 4th symphony, which is the shortest Mahler symphony and would seem to be the simplest, is actually going to have the biggest cast of the bunch so far. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. So I'm just wondering because you're maybe handling these components in a way that has to be learned, I guess, and then we can put together more complex shows as things progress. So the next I interrupted. I jumped in here on the cast list side is assembly of audio and creation of script.
Right. So what I do is I'll sort of, once I've got all the clips, I'll sort of put them in order on top of the music, basically everything except my script, and then write my script around that. And so that's kind of where I am now with season 4, where I'm just at the point where it's about to go to the team of editors. And I have a terrific team of editors. I've always liked to have a large group. We had 4 editors at first, now we have 5. And I like that because there's a democratic process that if everybody tells me that this part stinks, it stinks, and it goes, and you really, and if everybody likes something, then I know we've nailed it. And then if you have something where some people like it, it's half and half, you really realize this is very subjective. But there's a great deal of discussion between me and the editors, and I trust them all tremendously, and they've done such an amazing job, I think, of lifting what I bring to it, what I bring my rough draft, and then they lift it up much, much higher. And then the mixing of the final audio, you'd think would be pretty straightforward, but it takes a lot of time because we have, if you think about it, for season 3, we had 25 voices, and all of those voices need to be EQ'd in such a way that none of them jump out or pop out, or they all, it all has to kind of be in at least the same basic level, but on top of the music. And the music, of course, is a wildly dramatic sonic setup that you have to have these voices on top of, and then also gracefully bring the music underneath and bring it back up in the right places. So it's a real dance that our audio engineer, his name is Rick Kwan, I think he's sort of an audio wizard. He's able to make all of this really sparkle. If you were to hear the versions of these, an episode before it's mixed and after it's mixed, it's a huge difference. Huge difference.
Yeah, that is an art form. I wanted to ask you about the 5 editors. I thought the editors were also audio editors, but no, these are text editors going through transcripts of everything that's being said, including what you've written for yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, and they're also listening to the audio drafts. So they have and we can go through quite a few drafts of this. I remember with the last episode of season 2, which is the 5th movement, I think we had 42 drafts by the time we finished. So there's a lot of back and forth, and I love it. For me, it's each pass it improves. So
yeah, and what are you looking? I mean, you said you respect very much the feedback of the editors, but is there anything in your mind that you're thinking as sort of the touchstone that this is what you want to achieve, and when you know you're there, it, or you just feel uncomfortable until it feels good? I mean, is there something more conceptually clear than that?
Yeah, there's a point where I feel like it does start to, I can hear in the episodes, okay, we're there, we're getting there, we're almost there. It starts to sparkle in a way that it didn't before, or the questions or the concerns I have are no longer there. Marilyn is very good when she says, oh, this is awesome. Like if she says it's awesome, then I know we're actually probably pretty close, because she doesn't say that right from the beginning. Right. But she's but the editors the interesting thing is they each bring different things. So I might get a list of comments from one of them that's totally different, with all kinds of little things to fix that nobody else mentioned. So by doing all of them, each of them brings this, becomes bigger than the sum of its parts.
Sure.
In a way. And I think I just I like the collaboration part of it, because I know I can only take it so far on my own. I really do need that help of these experts to kind of help me lift it up.
Sure, but then somebody has to say it's a cut, and
Yes.
someone has to say enough is enough, or whatever, right? I mean, so that
Right. Well, that does fall to me to say, okay, we're
Sure.
done.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're done here. Yeah, we're
Yes.
done here. Interesting. Let's see, we're at the half-hour mark. Just a reminder, if you're with us live, feel free to send us questions to the chat. We'll be happy to answer in the Q&A at the end of the hour. All right, so we've taken a look at your workshop, Aaron, and now let's talk more specifically about producing the Fourth Symphony. And here we also have a chance to look and listen to a couple of sneak previews. I think we're going to start with the trailer for season 4, and then we'll talk more about some of the details that have gone into this in terms of the work itself. So let's listen to the trailer for season 4.
The great composer Gustav Mahler said that a symphony must be like the world. It must embrace everything. But in his Fourth Symphony, Mahler scaled back his orchestra to something more intimate.
This will surprise the gentleman who always claimed that I work only with the heaviest forces.
He created a symphony that defied all expectations. And the critics were shocked.
They don't really know what to do with this one. Which end should they start gobbling it up from?
Mahler's Fourth Symphony is childlike in character, playful.
Ideas poured out so abundantly that I scarcely knew how to catch them all, and was almost at a loss to fit everything in.
And those assembled ideas point us to heaven.
I see it more and more. One does not compose. One is composed.
I'm Aaron Cohen, and welcome back to Embrace Everything, the world of Gustav Mahler. In these programs, we take a deep dive into Mahler's extraordinary works, and this season we'll explore his Fourth Symphony. We'll hear from some of the world's foremost conductors, including Michael Tilson Thomas, Sir Simon Rattle, William Henry Curry, and Kent Nagano.
Even the title, Mahler gives it a humoresque symphony. What exactly does that mean?
We'll also speak with members of the New York Philharmonic, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, and the Berlin Philharmonic.
It sounds very childish, very naive, but I think the idea is it should sound like already having one foot in heaven, in paradise.
We'll learn from music scholars from around the world, and we'll hear the words of Mahler himself, as well as his closest friends, and the thinkers who inspired him most. Get ready for an extraordinary musical journey. Join me for season 4 of Embrace Everything, The Heavenly Life, Mahler's Fourth Symphony.
Well, it's impossible not to be inspired by that the ending of that third movement. Absolutely, it just takes you by the soul and lifts you up. So, of course, this is a highly produced, a collection of different moments in the piece. And when you and I were talking about this, we thought, well, we'll bring some specific examples, things that have not been heard yet, some real sneak previews. So, do you want to set up the next one? This is sort of a biographical context. I don't know if we want to say any more about that.
Sure. This is the opening of episode 2, and sometimes we do try to put some of the historical stuff in, and we usually play that or do that as a lead into getting to the music. So that's what this is. This is sort of the preview to getting into the music.
Mahler returns to the opening sleigh bells.
Actually, hang on. You've got the wrong.
This is the wrong one.
That's the wrong one. You want to just jump to the episode.
That's the season episode 1 excerpt. We want the episode 2 excerpt, I think.
Yes.
Nope.
There
it is.
No.
Mahler returns to the opening.
I think you've got the audio flip. So if you want to jump, try that one.
Let's try that one, Marco.
There you go.
In the summer of 1900, Mahler arrived in Meiringen, which was to be the site of his new house and a new composing hut. His plan was to spend the summer writing his Fourth Symphony. The last movement was a song called The Heavenly Life, and all the movements leading up to it would feature elements of this song. But once again, he had trouble getting started. Mahler's friend and confidant Natalie Bauer-Lechner was there. She tells us this.
He was quite depressed at this, in fact desperate. He was convinced that he would no longer be able to accomplish anything, and already saw the ghastly realization of his superstitious fear that he would have the house for composing, but never again be able to compose.
Part of the problem was that Mahler was exhausted from a recent concert tour in Paris.
But even more to blame, perhaps, was the nature of the work he is engaged on at present, which necessitated going back to last year's sketches of the Fourth Symphony and taking up the threads again. To get back into the work and continue it in the same vein as before was probably the hardest thing he has ever done.
Eventually, Mahler's compositional juices began to flow again.
He stayed in the summer house from 7 a.m. till 1 o'clock, later as long as 8 to 10 hours. This he stood better than usual, thanks to the gloriously mild climate and the delicious woodland air.
This was Mahler in his natural habitat. He said this,
I ask nothing of fate except a quiet little spot and a few weeks every year in which I can be entirely my own master.
Marina Mahler, Mahler's granddaughter and president of the Mahler Foundation.
It's always so amazing how somebody could have written all that in his summer holidays.
Composing in the summer was Mahler's typical routine.
The intensity during the rest of the year, because as we sleep, things are born. So sleep is also part of this life cycle of creation. And there must have been an awful lot going on in his sleep.
Mahler agreed.
We know that our second self is active while we sleep, that it grows and becomes and produces what the real self sought and wanted in vain. The creative artist, in particular, has countless proofs of this. But that this second self should have worked on my Fourth Symphony throughout 10 months of winter sleep, with all the frightful nightmares of the theater business, is unbelievable.
Mahler was surprised at how many ideas he had about his Fourth Symphony since the previous summer.
I find I am taking it up at a much more advanced stage than it had reached last year in Aussee, without having given it a moment's real attention in the meantime. On the contrary, I even ran away from the thought of it, as I found it so unsatisfying and painful.
Wonderful passages there, and truly unique moments in Mahler's reflections. I mean, he does on occasion talk about how he writes, but to hear that presented in such a way, I think that's just such a delight. So delightful.
Well, that one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that we try to get as much of Mahler and his, his text is the most important text that we have for each episode, no question. And so I'm just grateful that we had Natalie Bauer-Lechner to provide us with a lot of the things he said and transcribe them so beautifully. And yeah.
I wish nothing on the relationship, but if she had been around for some of the other pieces, of course, it would have been very, very valuable because as I've discussed on other shows, she was not only very close to Mahler, but also a musician. She knew what questions to ask, and she could also understand, even from a technical point of view, what he was getting at. So it was, yeah, she did the Mahler world certainly an enormous favor, but also the whole area of creativity and how this worked, at least in the case of this particular genius. All right, we have we'll try. We had some audio problems, but the other type of thing that you do, this is sort of the biographical historical context, but the other aspect of that the series that you put together is very attuned to musical elements, and so we thought we'd give you a sneak preview of how that's being done here as well. This would be the one that's marked episode 2, probably, Marco, if you're queuing up the audio, since we reversed them.
Okay, I think there's one.
We heard the beginning of it. We
Yeah,
heard the
the sleigh
beginning of it.
bell.
The sleigh bells one. I'm not sure what happened to it because we had that queued up.
You might have, it sounds like it looks like you might have two different episode 2 ones, Marco.
This is the one this is 130 or 133. All right. Well, this is an excerpt that explores the sleigh bells, which are such a unique sound to the Fourth Symphony, and one that comes back a number of times. And
yeah, I can just jump in it while Marco's looking for that. Just that one of the things we try to do is step away when something comes up like a sleigh bell, some musical element. We jump around and hear some other examples of that musical element in other contexts. And so we, step away from the symphony for maybe a minute, hear some other things, and we come back. And that's what this is an example of.
Maybe we've got it here.
Yes. Yes, that was it. You had it.
That was it.
That was it.
That was a return to the sleigh bells. And it's not the beginning of the symphony. It's later. It's further into the first movement.
Right.
Let's try it again.
I can take, while Marco's looking for that again, I can also say that sometimes we go a little longer than that. Like this is something where we're just talking about the sleigh bells, as you'll hear in a minute, but sometimes we go, really outside the symphony for 2-3 minutes, talking about, for example, what we're going to do with the third movement is variations. So we're going to go and examine what variations are. And really step out and hear some other, really get into the concept of musical variations. And then after several minutes, come back into the symphony. So that's another technique we use.
Right.
But this is a much shorter example here.
Mahler returns to the opening sleigh bells. Sleigh bells were a feature of his original song, The Heavenly Life. Conductor William Henry Curry.
I think for most Americans, the first time we hear sleigh bells in a piece of music is Leroy Anderson's Sleigh Ride, which was the first piece I conducted at age 14. I've conducted about 4,000 times since then, always to the delight of the audience. So whenever we think of sleigh bells, we think of Christmas. And what other orchestral piece before Mahler used sleigh bells? There's a German dance by Mozart. Doesn't say the word Christmas.
But it sure does sound like Christmas. And Mozart's father, Leopold Mozart, wrote a divertimento called The Musical Sleigh Ride. Let's go back to Mahler's sleigh bells.
You can sort of hear that's where we are able to just step outside the symphony just for a minute or two to give a little something, and then we're back in.
These are wonderful examples because it, as you say, it takes you outside the piece, but also brings up an awareness. For instance, the song "Sleigh Bells" on the beginning of the piece, and this moment in the middle of the first movement. These are audible signals that will stay with audiences when they hear the piece again, for sure. And it's extremely valuable to isolate them and bring them out like that. Anyway, so you've walked through now the gigantic Titan, the enormous Resurrection Symphony, and the even more gigantic Third Symphony. The fourth must be so much easier. And of course, you and I know that's not true, right?
Well, that was a surprise for me. I didn't really know that till I started doing my research. And what I discovered when I started doing a lot of the reading is that the Mahler community doesn't agree on the details of this symphony in terms of the meaning of it. And there's so many so many different ideas about different places within it. And this is so different from the earlier symphonies when I was doing symphonies 1, 2, and 3. Now you might have Mahler experts disagreeing on little details, but basically everybody agrees on the overall journey of the symphony. You know, there's nobody who listens to the end of the second symphony and says, well, that's kind of a downer. I mean, you know, it just doesn't come up. Everybody agrees that what the end of that symphony is. This was a surprise for me.
Do you think I mean, it may have to do with a couple of factors. One that immediately comes to mind is that Mahler was far less explicit about what he was doing in this piece. I mean, with 1, 2, and 3, you can really uncover a lot of information from the author, as it were. That's one aspect that enters my mind. But the other you've alluded to as well is the very contradictory nature of the music itself, right? I mean, this is an enormously complex piece dressed as a childlike symphony, which of course it's not. If you start looking at anything about it, it really is far more complicated than it sounds. So this is a real challenge, right? I mean, you want to catch the complexity without making it too complex, and you want to come up with an approach that echoes what people are saying in the scholarly literature. So you're in a bit of a predicament. We've talked a lot about this, and one of the reasons that the Fourth Symphony has been so challenging. Let's talk a little bit about the reception of it. We're going to start with Mahler's own comment, because he did leave a few sort of notices about it in certain places with certain people. The quote we're going to start out with is Mahler talking to Alma. And in the reception history of this piece, we should at least start with Mahler. I think we have a graphic for that. My Fourth Symphony will mean nothing to you. Well, why don't you read it? You're the narrative voice here.
My Fourth Symphony will mean nothing to you. It is all humor, naive, as you would say, just what you can so far understand least in me, and what in any case only the fewest of the few will ever understand for all time. And I have to say, I just think he nails it there, because clearly here we are 125 years after things written, and we're still arguing over what it means. So
he was right about that few will understand it, right? I mean, that's the one thing. But so let's just walk through a couple of examples, and then what little time we have left, I want to maybe go down that rabbit hole with you a little bit to say what you think this could be all about. Let's go to the nature of the music itself. Here we have two commentators on that. The fourth is the exact opposite of absolute music. And Bruno Walter saying, no, it is absolute music from beginning to end, organic in every movement. Now, it says a lot about these two gentlemen, one coming much later than the first. Bruno Walter defending the Fourth Symphony for not being programmatic in the vein of what Mahler was trying to convince his followers about, after there had been rumors that there was a program. So Bruno Walter here is reacting to a programmatic rumor. Konstantin Floros is someone who is going to be reading texts inside of notes all the time. I mean, that's what he's become famous for. And that kind of explains why we can end up on polar opposites with these two gentlemen. But it is still the same music. Let's go to the next one. This is about, I think this is on the end of the first movement.
The end of the development section of the first movement.
Right, end of the development. It's the most enigmatic and magical episode, and another commentator, a nightmare experience, too extreme to be tolerated. So is it magical or nightmarish? I think these two comments are not only meant in terms of the audio, sort of the oral impression, but in terms of what he's done musically. In any case, it's very sophisticated. For those of you who know a little bit about how he gets back into the recapitulation, and there is that famous moment where he is anticipating the trumpet call of the first movement of the Fifth Symphony, exactly at this juncture. So it does portend deeper things. But again, same music. All right, and then our fourth our example here is about style and form, just the feel of the piece. The initial movement of the fourth can hardly be thought of as anything but an homage to Haydn and Viennese classicism. And James Sukovich saying Mahler was not attempting to write an overtly neoclassical work. This gets tricky though, doesn't it? Isn't it really about intention and how one wants to interpret the sound? Tell us a little bit about the neoclassical side of this. Are you taking up the mantle for that argument that he's purposefully going back to a sound from the past?
My interpretation of it is that he, in a childlike way, is pretending and playing at being Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven, because what do you do if you're a musical genius and you want to have some fun? It's like a little kid who puts on a costume and pretends to be something else. So, and of course, being as he is Mahler, and he has his own musical things that are very different from Beethoven and Mozart and Haydn. So he has the sound of them, but he does his own things with them. So I feel like it is Mahler dressing up and having fun, pretending, to do these other things. Because if you listen to, you put the opening of the Fourth Symphony next to any place in the Third Symphony or the Second Symphony, you wouldn't even know they're the same composer.
Yeah. Yeah, so stylistically, he certainly is refitting the ship and seeing what he can get out of it. All right, let's go to I think we have one more quote for contrast's sake. This is Bruno Walter again versus Theodor Adorno. Exultant happiness, a great cheerfulness, an unearthly joy. And Adorno saying it's deeply impregnated with sorrow. Now, and this is getting at something that that you and I talked about as well, is what's the overarching impact and message, or what do we think, again, what do we think it's about? How do we get to sorrow and how do we get to happiness, Aaron? Can you take us down both of those paths?
Well, the happiness part, I think you can hear very clearly in the music. It does strike me as a really joyous piece. I don't hear, there are places where I hear sorrow, but it's a much smaller proportion of the symphony, specifically parts of the third movement. So the idea that the whole thing is deeply impregnated with sorrow doesn't ring true for me. I was thinking about this the other day. The symphony is almost an hour long. If I had to point out the parts that are sort of not joyous or more serious in the style of the things we hear in maybe the Second Symphony, there's only a couple minutes of that throughout the symphony. So overall, I do think it is a joyous, cheerful symphony. I don't think you can be Mahler without giving us a couple of those moments. And I wonder if people just have a hard time with the idea that this is Mahler enjoying himself. We're so used to, this is the guy that can't seem to write anything without throwing a funeral march into it. We have to have, and there isn't a funeral march for the most part in this. So, I keep going back to Mahler's quote, "It is all humor." And I just feel that he's telling us right there, but we just have a hard time believing him in some way, knowing what we know about his other symphonies and what's to come. And, this is what I'm coming up with in my own interpretation of it. There's a wonderful podcast called Sticky Notes by Joshua Weilerstein, and he does 2 episodes on Mahler 4, and he does something great at the end. He goes through the different interpretations, 3 different ways we can interpret the ending. And then I think he picks his favorite. And I think this is fabulous. We do, in some of our earlier seasons, we'll sort of play something twice and say, and here's another interpretation, it's another way we can look at it. So I'm all for, multiple interpretations. And this is something we will be doing in season 4. But I do feel that, the quotes that are going to be the most important for us are going to be from Mahler and Bruno Walter. And we have others, but those 2 are the ones that are going to guide, I think, season 4.
Yeah. You're trapped. Do you present all the contradictory views, or do you do you have to decide? After all, this is also an interpretive act. I mean, you're taking pieces of music and you're presenting them. And as we all know, it's a question of what you present and don't present and how you do that, right? No one can write a book and say it's absolutely impartial. And in the case of the Mahler literature, it would take you a lifetime to present everybody's perspective. So you are coming down on some aspect of it. And frankly, given my own views as a music historian, I take Mahler's word first. And if it doesn't make sense to me, I am going to re-examine my presuppositions. I'm going to examine, why it doesn't make sense to me, as opposed to dismissing it as somehow irrelevant. I don't know. Maybe that's a sort of a wild, historically based notion, but it sounds like you're doing something similar with this too. You have to make decisions.
I think we absolutely agree on that. Totally. We both look to Mahler first. And one of the other things that helps with, or at least helps guide my decisions, is that the clips that we play and the excerpts that we have the actors read, we put it on top of the music, and there has to be some truth there. It's very hard to have someone saying this is full of sorrow and you're hearing a cheery tune behind it. So we have to make sure that what's saying, that there's a truthfulness that comes through with the music, that the music is also telling us and agreeing with what's being said. So that really steers a lot of the decisions that I end up making as well, because the music is the
You're
star.
being held.
Yeah.
You're being held up to the music in real time, right? I mean, there's no avoiding as the music is witnessing your very words. We are running out of time, and we still have, we're going to go into some questions. And I would love to maybe go down the rabbit hole of the Fourth Symphony with you in much more detail. This is something that we unfortunately don't have time for today, but there are fascinating questions inside of all of this. I also want to, before we close this segment, I want to point out that your website also contains a lot of additional material. You mentioned Bernstein and others, and we saw a little bit of that also in the graphics for these shows. If you go to the website, you will see a lot more information. You want to tell us a little bit more about what else is there? It's not just a podcast, if I can put it that way.
Sure. Each episode has a page that lists all the different recordings we use and everybody who's involved in the episode. We also have some video episodes. So Mahler and the Maestro is both an audio, you can hear it in the podcast feed, but there's also a video version that was produced in partnership with the New York Philharmonic, and they added all these images of Leonard Bernstein that are not the popular ones that we've seen in all the books. These are special ones from their archives that have not been published before. So that was really, really special. We have that on the website. We have a bonus episode about Mahler's friend Siegfried Lippener, who I have a sort of a fascination with. And we also have a page of extras, and I think we have about 25 of them now. And these are little clips, some long clips, some small clips, but with all sorts of people talking about things to do with seasons 1, 2, 3. These could be things that for whatever reason couldn't fit into the episodes, or things I got after we finished the season, and I thought, oh, I wish we could get that in, but let's put it
right.
Yeah, so that's actually expanding. My hope is that one day we'll have more than 100 little extras on there. Right now, I think we have 25. We're going to put a new batch up just before the Amsterdam Mahler Festival. So yeah. So there's a lot on the website. It's theworldofgustavmahler.org is our website.
Do go for all of those of you who are watching today. And I also wanted to introduce, however briefly, because I knew we would run out of time, but still I want her on the show because she's been a guest before, and I really want to say hi to her, and maybe she can also address some of the questions. Marilyn McCoy is also available for the show today. She's in our green room waiting for this, and I told her just before the show, I don't want to put you on the spot, but please join us for a few minutes. Marilyn, welcome. I hope you're there.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, great. There you are, Marilyn.
Yay.
Yay. Aaron has talked extensively about your tremendous contribution, and I wanted just to ask you as well, what does this project come to mean for you, and how you go about doing this?
Well, what I say is this is the most fun and fulfilling thing I've ever done. And it's great for many, many reasons. And also too, like the chemistry that Aaron and I have, especially when we're doing those interviews, like, you know, he would interview me, and usually, like, because I'm fluent in German, like that's really something I have. And so, you know, I'll read all the German stuff, and so I'd go, well, this and that, but then after a while we're going, well, what about this? And like our minds just started to kind of wander into really exciting places. And so that's probably one of the most fun things about it. But then too, it gives me the pleasure of going back to these works and listening to them again carefully again.
Yeah.
Which I've already done many times, and I'm sure many, you, Morten, and because these pieces, they are endlessly interesting and complicated. And so recently, Aaron said, well, what do you think about this Mozart Haydn thing, and the influence that, in the movement or in the symphony? And I kind of went, And I was listening to the first movement again, and I thought, wait, you don't know when the symphony is going to end. He fakes you out. He fakes you out at least 3 times. You think it's over. And I thought, that's Haydn. Because I just taught the joke quartet in class that day, and it's like, wow. And so, it's not overbearingly Haydn, but all the same, and so you never know for sure, but it's suggestive. So, yeah. And I also, like, one other kind of interesting memory I have is that when we did the third, especially the pieces with text, and also I'm very much interested in Mahler's songs and Mahler's texts. And so I remember Aaron said, okay, O Mensch gebe acht, and then also the 3 angels, sang, and then he threw up, put up these things. And I said, look, the poem in the 5th movement is weird. And you're going to have to put translations in, and you're going to have to kind of formulate what the heck is going on here so the listener will get it. And so this little short movement that is so complicated, and the text is so odd. And so, and that was also like working with, with James, with Mahler's voice, and, fitting it all in. And so, so that was kind of fun. And so yeah. And then also I remember too, like, he asked me a question about the Adagio, the last movement of the third. And I was like, I am going to sit down and I'm going to solve this thing that I've wondered about for the longest time. Like, what is the structure of this? What is this refrain form? So anyway, so it's generally just, it's really fun. And
well, you learn so much on projects, and again, teaching is like that too. And you have to present, and you have to put things into a form that is communicated. It opens up so many floodgates of learning for oneself. Even if you've been, as you said, Marilyn, you've been over this so many times, the learning process never ends, which is just a great joy. And Aaron, the way you've managed to put this all together makes it so accessible, which of course you do too as well, Marilyn. I have lots of questions here. We are over time, but I am going to go through the questions because I think people deserve to hear answers because they are clearly being very attentive on today's show. So Anthony Raumann writes, how have you managed to arrange the distribution of the pods to such a wide audience? Personal connections, and have you used AI to assist? I guess this is really more of a marketing question. How does it get out there to the world?
I use a company, one company that distributes it to all the different podcast platforms, and that's available, I think, to anybody who wants to sign up for it, Art19. And as far as AI, I have been thinking about how to get AI involved with this. I might be using some of it with season 4, helping with some of the scripts. I'm convinced that by the time I get to season 10, I'll be able to say to AI 5 years from now, play me season 10, and it will just invent it for me and play it, and it'll be better than anything we could come up with, and it'll just do my voice, and it'll do everything. So. Yeah. That's kind of where I could be going.
To me, it's a sad day. It just shows how old I am. Another question from Anthony Raumann. How much were you influenced by Leonard Bernstein's lectures and TV broadcasts as an inspiration for the concept of Embrace Everything?
Well, Leonard Bernstein is one of my great heroes. I have loved the Young People's Concerts and the Harvard lectures, and I've read and read and read and listened. But I actually came to him sort of after I started. I mean, I loved him, but I really got more into it once I'd already embarked on the series. As I came to understand just how, he was the Mahler. That he was the prophet. He was the guy who gave us.
Yeah. Here's a question from Raymond Chan. How do you get feedback from your audience? Are they mostly familiar with Mahler already, or general music lovers? Any special story to share from the audience feedback? Thanks for the podcast series.
Yeah, well, I get emails from everybody around the world every week. People, listeners. My email is on the website. Just I think last month I got a wonderful note from a woman in Australia who had said she was just, she just decided she'd heard a lot about Mahler. She, did a search, came up with this, and what she said was she just didn't expect to fall in love, with the music, which is what happened. So I always thought that was just a beautiful thing. And that's what
that is beautiful. So the answer in terms of communication is mostly email, and they communicate directly with you.
Yes.
Through, your channel. I have one from John Knapp. You do an incredible job of inserting and overlaying commentary on the music so that it's never disruptive, but instead always illustrative and additive. So many promising music podcasts and audiobooks have failed at this, to my great frustration. So 1, kudos. And 2, did you have this experience listening to other works before you started? Did you research other attempts at this format to see what worked and what did not?
It's funny you mentioned that. Yes, I did. I've done a couple programs similar to this. The warm-up to the Mahler series was actually a 3-part series about Richard Strauss, which feels actually appropriate. And that was a radio program that happened in 2014, where it was a similar technique that we had many guests, there was a narrator, and the music was underscored through the whole thing. It's called Music is a Holy Art. That's actually on our website. And it's also, if you just do a search for Music is a Holy Art, you can find that series. And I also did a program many, many years ago with Jad Abumrad, who is the host of Radiolab. People might know him, just an incredible radio personality. We did about Wagner's Ring Cycle, a program called The Ring and I, which was similar to this, and then we had a bunch of guests, and Jad was narrating and the music, and we had a lot of fun with it, and that program did very well. And it's still available. You can look up The Ring and I as well. So yes, I would say that all of that was practice for Mahler. Everything now I just feel like everything was a practice for Mahler, because that was the one I always wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, like we said at the beginning, looking back, it makes sense, but while you're doing it, it's a lot of groping about, isn't it? And I have one from Victoria. Thank you for generously sharing your extraordinary contributions for humanity. Please, can you tell us the very first time you heard Mahler, where were you and how old were you?
I think I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I heard a concert of the 7th Symphony, which is interesting because to this day, I still love the 7th. I know that for some people that's just not a favorite, but for me, it always has been sort of the odd duck in there. And I just heard that and I thought, wow, this is really, it just grabbed me right away.
How old were you?
I think it was 16, 17.
Yeah, that's, I think this is the Mahler moment that, in a sense, I was alluding to at the beginning of the show. I think we kind of remember when something happened and then things were different after that.
Yeah.
And that you realize that music can do this. This is what I was trying to explain as well, is that, this is it's going to a place that I hadn't experienced in any other composers. There's a comment here from Jason Starr. Bravo, Aaron. You cover so much about each symphony, from the biography to the philosophy to the music. Can you tell us how you managed to integrate these different elements so effectively into a single dramatic arch?
I think a lot of trial and drafts, many drafts. You put it up, it doesn't work, you change something, and then you just keep doing that until it does work. So there's a lot of experimentation. It's never whatever my first draft is, that's nowhere near where we'll actually find our way. Well, the only other thing I'll say about that is there are producers who like to write it all in the script, and I like to get it off the page and into the audio as quickly as possible so that I can hear how the music is working with the commentary. So I'm usually, when I'm tweaking drafts, I'm not even looking at the script. I'm just listening to what we have and trying to improve it.
Mm-hmm. I liked what you said about having the music and the commentary and then building in your bit, because you know what needs to be filled in, and you know what wants to be said, even if it's said or not said. And in case it isn't, you say it, right? I mean, that's another way to take command of the material. And that's a great luxury. And this is a similar question from Francisco Bricio. What are the criteria you use to decide what stays and what has to be discarded? I'm sure there are many gems you would wish they would have stayed in the show.
Yes. Well, ultimately it comes down to, and you're right, Francis, there are heartbreaking moments of stuff I still wish we had kept in some way, or I'll find another way, or it ends up on the extras page. But ultimately it comes down to, for the episode, does the episode have what it needs, touch on all the important things, do it in a way that's inspiring and elegant and graceful, and give the listener what I sort of consider to be the most important. It needs to, the episodes kind of need to stand alone. So if you've got a lot of extra stuff in there, it can feel like the episode's kind of clunky, even if you really like the material. So the episodes kind of become their own little works of art that have to live on their own. So that's sort of how I end up making those decisions.
Yeah, good insight. Sixto Speckmesser writes, Mahler Foundation will embrace everything cover aspects of performance practice. For example, Mahler wrote for a specific layout of strings as confirmed by Bauer-Lechner and photographs. This might even be something for you, Marilyn. I don't know. Are you going to talk about this?
Could you repeat the question?
The specific layout. Mahler wrote about the specific layout of the strings, and we know this from photographs and from comments in Bauer-Lechner. Is this an aspect that you will talk about in terms of performance practice?
Actually, I didn't know about that until recently. I noticed it. So I hadn't read about it. I haven't seen photographs, but I have noticed how original and inventive, the orchestration is. It's something that sounds so simple, but it's not. There's so many different colors that wouldn't have come out any other way. So I'm not surprised at all to hear that. But it'll be interesting. I don't really know. I haven't have any knowledge of any evidence, but it might be there.
Well, the arrangement of the strings, where you put the firsts and seconds, I mean, that's one thing that's obviously a big question. Do you divide the violins? And in Mahler's day, that seems to have been the practice, at least for Mahler. All right, there's another question about instruments here. In fact, Anthony Raumann writes back, sleigh bells are orchestra's bell. Wasn't life a terrible joke for Gustav Mahler? Ooh, there's a weighty question and a, if I may say so, one with a lot of implication.
Well, I would say that those two, thank you for that. Those comments from Mahler came from two different places. The one about isn't life a joke, that's from the Second Symphony when he's, raising his fist at God in the Totenfire movement. And the Jester's cap is what he said about the opening of the Fourth Symphony. So those comments are coming 5 years apart. He's working on very different material. So for me, they're different. Yeah.
Yes, but does the gesture comment refer to the sleigh bell sonority? I think that might be.
I do feel it does. Yes. Sorry, I didn't get that part. Yes.
Yes. And then would that then imply that it's just all a big joke? In other words, the humor here, is that of a sardonic variety?
For me, I don't think so. I think this is a Jean-Paul kind of humor. And so there is a playfulness, there is I feel like that Jester's cap is meant in the innocent, childlike way, not sardonic.
Okay.
That's my interpretation of it.
Okay.
I feel like it is part of the cheerful, light spirit of the first movement.
Oh, yeah, of course, a jester was the one person who got away with making fun of the king, right? There is that.
Yeah.
John Knapp asks another question, if there's time. Do you know the origin of Bernstein's decision to have a boy sing the fourth movement of the fourth? Obvious inspiration is found in the text itself, but did Mahler himself consider it?
I don't know the inspiration of that. I've heard the recording, but I really don't know. I mean, I don't think Mahler, Morten, you might know.
I have no reason to think Mahler wanted that. He
think
does say something about the singer having to be, to give the impression of naivete and, not some sort of soprano idol coming out there and having her show. She's really supposed to be very much in the background to the music. That's true. but I hear no reference to a boy soprano. You, Marilyn?
I feel like I have a vague memory of that, but it could be hearing Bernstein's recording first.
Yeah.
And thinking this was a bad idea, because boy sopranos to sing that song for a kid and to be as relaxed as you need to be is very difficult. Because I recently found a recording of a boy soprano singing Laudate Dominum, this gorgeous solo by Mozart from the Mozart Vespers. And he was the most laid back. I thought, wow, that kid is relaxed enough, maybe, to pull it off. But I think Mahler had to know that wouldn't work too. He had to know that.
The idea of it being a child comes from also a movement title he considered for the Das himmlische Leben when it was still part of the Third Symphony, and it was called What the Child Tells Me. So to the extent that there is a reference to the child in regard to that movement, that's true, and that is Mahler. But of having an actual child perform it, that I think would be going a step further than Mahler had conceived. Anyway, interesting question.
I'm going to go look now.
One other thought I might just add there is it seems to me that Mahler really does like the female voices when you think of, the mezzo-soprano in the Third Symphony and the Second Symphony. I mean, I feel like he really likes the female voice.
Yeah. And he does use boys choir in the fifth movement of the Third Symphony and in the Eighth Symphony, and so there are sounds that he's using, but so he could have called for that if that in fact was what he wanted. I would suspect.
Yeah.
I have a question from Pedro Arozamena Cagigal. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Reacting to your season 10 comment, what about season 11, Aaron? And I think there might be a reference here to the fact that there are 10 numbered symphonies and Das Lied. I hope you're going to do Das Lied.
Yes, definitely going to do Das Lied. And I also wonder, another possible interpretation of that question, is AI going to give us Mahler's 11th Symphony? We'll be able to listen through all the Mahler symphonies and project where Mahler would go. Or maybe another version of the 10th, rewrite the 10th again. I mean, I don't know, but who knows where AI is going to take us?
No, I believe that has already been attempted, actually. But season 11 would be necessary, even if you didn't come up with another symphony, because of the fact that, season 10 would be the 10th Symphony, and then, of course, Das Lied would make it number 11. Yes. Depending on the order. There's another question by Pedro Arozamena. You mentioned at the end of the development, but what about the beginning of the recapitulation? Isn't it masterful? I think we kind of covered it, the first movement of the fourth, of course. Yes, it's the transition to the beginning of the recap, which of course is not the beginning of the theme, because that already began at the end of the development quite cleverly. And of course, yes, very masterful. I have another question. Hello from Ithaca, New York. As a non-musicologist but Mahler enthusiast for more than 45 years, who has read all the major biographies, I just want to say that Aaron's work has been unique in that it helps explain to me why I have the visceral responses that I have to the music. Bravo. That's very, very nice. Okay, and then one more. Do you from Victoria? Do you feel free? I'm not quite understanding the sentence here. Share with us how the Rockefeller Foundation found out about you. I guess I'm assuming you applied, but I guess tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, there's an application form that you have to fill out, and then there's an interview process. And then one day they called and said, "We'd love to have you here," which was a great thing.
Well, great. Many thanks for both of you for coming today, and good luck with season 4.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just great to talk with you, Morten. Really appreciate it.
We're way over time, folks, but I'm just end the show here. I have a few announcements. We've received questions recently about the involvement of Mahler Foundation at the upcoming Concertgebouw Mahler Festival in May. And I'm happy to announce that I have been asked to present all of the pre-concert talks of the symphonic repertoire. So if you are attending the festival, do drop by before the performance for a preview of the symphony featured that evening. So I'll be doing all of the symphonies, which I greatly look forward to. And you have the dates there, 9 through 18 May, coming up in this year. Also, look for an upcoming announcement of an event that Mahler Foundation is still planning to host members of Mahler societies from around the world and more. we'll try to keep you updated on that as well. So for all of you Mahler people coming, we will hopefully be able to see you and meet you there. The Mahler Hour, brought to you by Mahler Foundation and contributors around the world, is a monthly streaming event bringing together individuals interested in the composer, the thinker, the humanist Gustav Mahler, as we explore not only his life and works, but also how his legacy still informs essential aspects of the human experience, and how we can turn that experience into a force for the good in today's world. Become a member and support our activities. I want to thank my guests today, Aaron Cohen and Marilyn McCoy, for joining us, as well as our production team, Marco Ayala, and Monica Anguiano, our Executive Director for Administration. The Mahler Hour is back a month from today, March 22nd, with a segment dedicated to Mahler resources online and the International Gustav Mahler Society. I hope you can join us. That's our program for today. Stay safe. Thanks for watching.